ERP solutions such as Sage 300 CRE are a great way to house your data in a secure system, allowing you to perform several functions while still maintaining the integrity of your data. Data that is saved in a relational database is typically stored in tables like the ones you see here. This is where all of your data resides. When you perform activities in Sage, such as paying a bill, the data on the tables are updated accordingly. The data flows all throughout your system, making sure to hit the corresponding applications. AP invoices may be paid or posted, going to your general ledger, cash management, and updating the costs in job costs. Ensuring that the integrity of data remains intact is an important piece to the CRE function. When we take a look at pulling information into Excel and working with it, many of you may be currently printing these inquiries, printing these reports directly into Excel and working with the data in that fashion, essentially looking at a snapshot of the information. This is not what we'll be doing today. We're dynamically linking Excel into the 300 CRE database, ensuring all security permissions are respected, to ensure that you're constantly up to date with all of the changes that are happening in your accounting system, now reflected in a meaningful way within Excel. The disadvantage when it comes to that is that the data is static. It's not updated. I'll have to go back into 300 and print the report again, send the query out again. What we're looking to do with Office Connector is dynamically link one to the other, ensuring that once the database is updated, it's pulling that information to Excel, and when I want new information, I can ping the database to pull that in, making sure that we're constantly refreshing that information dynamically so that I get all the up-to-date costs, billings, and entries from my 300 CRE system. When we look at importing information, you're most likely familiar with a lot of the different ways all throughout the system. Importing costs, importing budgets, importing time entries and payroll. All of this follows a certain set and required way to make sure the information is sent into the database correctly. That format you see here in the middle is a clear example when importing specific amounts and data points directly into the database and then right to those associated tables. Ensuring that format is accurate is where Office Connector Import can help out your team. Here's a quick glimpse of some of the different import features you have with Office Connector. They all correspond with those specific import features in those applications. Things like import AP invoices or import GL budgets. Right now, all throughout your 300 CRE system, those import functions have corresponding import applications within Sage Office Connector, allowing you to easily transform that information from Excel into 300 CRE. And with that brief overview, I'll go ahead at this time and transition the presentation on over to our resource, James Coyle, who'll be taking you through our Office Connector import. One moment,
Excellent.
James, while I transition this on over to you.
And thanks for that fantastic introduction. And I'll recap some of those points that Chloe made for everyone as we move forward through this presentation. Chloe, could you confirm you see my screen? It should be a job cost application that I have.
Yes, I do, James.
Okay, great, thanks. And again, thanks everyone. So as Chloe had said, you know, there's multiple products in the Office Connector product suite, all with their different purposes. And in this presentation, focusing on import. However, often people confuse the concept of writing and importing. And we talked about it a little bit, but I'm just going to really point it out again that when we write to the database, people typically will use it for things like setup or maintenance of information like jobs, cost codes, categories. Maybe on the categories, I want to change the GL account on a whole bunch of categories, or maybe I want to set up jobs, or what have you. I could also, through an import process of estimates, realize that when I'm creating the job, there's other things that I want to do that import doesn't allow me to do. It has a scope of what it allows, but I want to do more. And I could then use two technologies together. The writing capability, though, does not create the detail entries. So these detail entries over here, like estimates or direct cost or miscellaneous worksheets, wouldn't get created by write. You cannot create new rows. They have to be manually entered here through these screens, which you're probably familiar with, or imported through a program over here on the respective import menus. So that's how you get detail in. Now, once the detail's there, there are replaceable columns on those tables, we have a recording of a presentation on write that would go into how you could discern what you could write to. And I'll point out a tool here toward the end, or in the Q&A section, if you have questions about that, we can address it. But we're going to focus on importing. So I just want to talk a little bit about why would someone even want to be doing this. So if one of the examples we're going to do is to import an estimate. So if I went in here and to enter estimates and job cost, I'm using a use of job cost, and I'm using it the entire time that I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing. Later, when we talk about import will use a use of job cost, but only for a small amount of time to run a program that I will show you. It's part of the Sage programs over here on the tools menu. But if I were manually entering it, I would have to, pick my job and put in my extra and cost code and navigate all these columns and then do the next row and the next row. And manually doing it here inside this grid. And if there were things that I wanted, like to enforce a certain value going in a column that Sage wouldn't otherwise enforce, or there's data that repeats, but I have to, actually you can tab through most of it, it'll copy down, but still, a grid, like in Excel, normally people can navigate faster, check their information, confirm it's accurate versus typing it in here, posting, then finding out it's not the way you would like it to be. Or the source of this information is coming from somewhere else. Someone's already put it somewhere, perhaps in Excel, and now you have to take the time to read it and type it in here. And so what is that? It's about time, saving you time and the accuracy of having to do it. And sometimes what we're talking about is thousands of entries. So we may be only using a couple of examples in this introduction, but what I'm discussing here will pertain to invoices and accounts payable. It could be from a credit card website, you have detail and you want to allocate it to expense accounts or jobs or what have you, and then get it into Sage's accounts payable, but you don't want to manually type it. So you could import that, or payroll time, or just quite a few other things that you could do. But we'll be using these kinds of examples. So rather than type that there using the use of job cost the whole time, I want to work more efficiently. So I can come to tools and go to import, and I can import estimates here. And I can import direct costs here, and I can import commitments here. It's part of Sage, assuming you have the security rights to do the things I'm demonstrating. Now, as you see, you do not see import miscellaneous worksheets. So the only way to do that would be with Office Connector, import miscellaneous worksheets. But these other ones you could import this way if you knew how. So how would you go about doing that? Well, in all the applications, if you go to the help topics and you come over here to index, you can type the word import. So if I was in accounts payable, I could do the same thing. In payroll, I could do the same thing. And I'm going to see a list of things that pertain to job cost and importing. So I would scan through here and I would read this, or I'd have a consultant teach it to me, or whatever it is that I needed to do. But let's say I wanted to do an estimate. So right down here, it's estimate file, the layout and all this other type of stuff. So let's say I just click on this, and it begins to tell me that in this file, I'm going to have a row for the job header. I'm going to have a row. I know that that's what it's saying. If this is the first time you're seeing it, then, I've been affiliated with this technology for 35 years, so pretty much I know it. But I got a row for the cost code, the category. I might have a row for the extra if I use extras, comments, and then talks about the types of fields so you have to comply with what the requirement is. And if you do so by whatever means, an outside program or Excel, and you save it as a CSV, a comma separated value file, this right here, if you click it, this is your objective. you want rows like this. See that now in here, P stands for phase because that's what um, um, those were originally called. These are categories. So cost codes were originally called phases years and years ago, and now they're called cost codes. And C is category, and there could be an extra. There's not. There is one right there. You know, for the job, there's an extra, and up here's the job. So that's what I'm trying to create. It may not even seem that difficult. If you make one mistake, like putting a comma in numbers, then the program that's running, that's importing, will misconstrue that. So you need to create the import files correctly, not making one mistake. And that is what Office Connector Import, that's its main purpose, is to create an import file that's properly formatted. And its other purpose is to allow you to work in Excel the way you would like to work and still be able to create that, rather than having to enter or maintain data in Excel in this format. It's not a very natural way to go about things. So take this concept and apply it to any of the other imports that you might be thinking. They're all similar, although not all of them have this hierarchical, multiple types of rows structure. So help is where that's discussed. Also discussed in here is what would happen if I left a value out. If I didn't put something in, what would the import program do? That's not the responsibility of Office Connector. Office Connector simply puts the file in the correct format. The program that will discern what happens if you leave things out is this program. For estimates, it's right here. If I click this, a program is running. This program actually will put the transactions into Sage. You identify your import file, rejections, and there's other information that you would fill out here. And when you hit start, it will go ahead and run the process, and then a report will run and tell you, did you make mistakes, or what happened. This is the program that actually does the importing, and this uses the use of job cost, but only during the time it's importing. So really not all that long. So that's what has been available for a considerable amount of time. So what we did is we made this easier. That's our intention. Our objective is to make this right here easier. So there's a launchpad for Office Connector that we mentioned, and there's a lot of different tabs, and you can even add tabs as I've done. The reports tab will have the reports that are like default launchpad reports for query, or the right-enabled ones will be there on that. And then the import tab have examples on how you might go about importing. Now I say examples because there's just so many ways that someone might configure information in Excel and want to get it in. So these examples will work, they can be demonstrated, but there's also a designer that comes with import, and you can simply just map the import function that you're going to see here shortly to your own workbook, and I'll demonstrate that. But first, I'm just going to generate a workbook from this template right here. And so when I open that up, I want to reinforce as strongly as I can that this itself is not Office Connector import. This is a workbook generated from a template, an example template that utilizes import and also utilizes query. And it says that right here when I open it up, and it says it right here. Now, the point is that when you have the ability to import, you're not limited to just this workbook. You could be importing estimates for a variety of different purposes. Maybe you've misentered a bunch of estimates and you want to reverse them out. Well, the same import capability could accomplish that, assuming you can collect the data in the way that you would otherwise manually enter it. You wouldn't manually enter it, you'd have this do it for you. But the point is you can use the import features, how you need to use them. And we'll talk more about what are individual features and all that. We'll go through that at the end. But you'll see in every template that you utilize that's off the shelf, it'll describe the work process, the intention. Read this. Take the time to read it. It'll make this all much more understandable for you. But for time's sake, I'm just going to come here, and I have sample data, construction sample data, so I'm just going to utilize that. And so in this case, it's saying, because this template utilizes both query and import, it says, you've put a job in here, and I know that job is not in Sage. And so I have a formula here that looks to see if it's in Sage, and if it's not in Sage, it says it'll be created through the import process. And if the job already existed, it would say it already existed. Um, Now, the main reason this is here is to inspire you and someone else as to things that you could do, right? You don't have to just use this tool, although it will be usable. Now, notice there's a lot of information I type in about the job. And when the import process happens, this will be in that import file, and the import file will read it and put it in there. But that import file has a scope. The import program has a scope. It will import certain things when it creates a job, but not everything. So there's no GL account, or is it certified and requiring daily entry, or whatever, checkboxes, things that you might need to do when you do a setup. So you could choose to use this and create the job and import it, and then go into Sage and complete the setup. Or as we've mentioned, there's another product called Write, and they could work together. So I could create the job and put all those values on it using the Write and then import. So it's just a matter of assembling what your process is, what process you want to follow. Now, in this example, and your importing an estimate does not have to be as much as this, right? Some people already have it in Excel, and you could simply put the formulas I'm about to show you next to the data. But what we did is through query, we're giving you the right to pick your categories. So these are my categories. If you have different categories when you use it, the query is showing me a list, and I pick the categories, and these categories will then occupy these rows. So you see I have labor, and I have overtime, and labor burden, and all these different types of things. So I could put my values in here, or I could just put amounts in here, and now they're sitting in Excel. So how do they get into Sage? Well, I just come up here to this add-ins, and up here, this little toolbar right here, and it could be above or below the big long one, depending on what order you installed things in. But on this toolbar, there's a variety of options, and one of them is Save Import File. So when you click that, Office Center Import will look through the entire workbook for every import function and for any feature that you have. Like, for example, if I was importing payroll time, I could also import miscellaneous worksheets to job costs because I collected units in place when I was doing time. And I could, let's say I have equipment and I don't want to import it into payroll because I want my equipment to each have a different date, the date it was used as a billing date versus the period ending date. So I could create 3 import files from that. This one will only have 1, but the point is all the functions will be evaluated. And so in this workbook are TS import functions. And I'm going to show you where they are just so that you can see them. Now, if you were going to build something yourself with a designer, you wouldn't probably go to all this trouble. You just use it or have someone build it for you, or you'd build it in a simpler way. But the people who built this, the consultants, were trying to do a lot more than what you will have to do, because this has to work for any Sage user who might utilize it. But see over here where it says TS import, that's an import function. This import function is created by using the import wizard right there. That import wizard right there. If I used it, it would walk me through. It's like, okay, well, an estimate has a job level and a cost code. And what is it you want to do right now? And I could say, well, I want to do the job, and it will prompt me for where the information is and build a formula. And that's the formula. And I'll see another import for each of those rows. So that's a process you'd follow if you were going to use the wizard. Once you do it once, it's pretty easy. But if you just have the features, or if it's already built, you don't have to know any of that. Those columns are all going to be hidden. All you would be doing is typing that in there, and then when you're all ready, you're going to click this button here. And you could, if you're familiar with Office Center or Excel, you probably already know that instead of coming up here and clicking this button, I could put a little button right here that says Import to Sage. That's just Excel, right? Inserting a button. It's under Developer Tools. And I could then invoke this import. So I don't have to have someone come up here to this toolbar if I don't want to, but it's not that difficult. You just click this, and it's going to look through all the file, and it's going to identify, oh, you're importing estimates. At this point, when you go to do this, it will determine if you have that feature, because we will not create an import file if you don't own the respective feature. It's very affordable to own all of them, or even the designer includes all of them. So that's the most affordable way to go about these things. And it's telling you, like, I'm going to put it into this file, into this folder. For you, the first time, I think it defaults to the folder you have your construction data in, and it may default a name, but you could change this. Just you use the same name each time if you want to do the next thing I'm going to recommend. So when you do this, and if I chose to do this and do no action, the outcome of this process is to create a file. And it may already be out there. So let's have a look. Well, it's not out there, but this one is. So that's a job cost estimate import file. So if I right click this and I like edit it or open it, these are those rows. You saw that in the help, right? Here you go, the same rows. So this is my objective. This is what I'm trying to create. And so if I come here and just say, okay, then it will create that file. And I would then, and that's what I'm going to do in a moment. I would then, what would I do next? Would it be in Sage when I create the file? Does that get it into Sage? I'm testing whether you're listening to me earlier. And the answer is no. Creating that file doesn't get it into Sage. Creating the file creates the file. To get it into Sage, you'd have to come here and go to Tools and Import and Estimates, right? And then you'd have to identify that file. Like click right here and it would be sitting right there. Right now, that fish lodge one's sitting right there, and you'd fill this out. And you could do that. And I recommend that's probably the way to start. Start simple, the way you would, but we can make it so much more smooth. We can create the file, and then we could launch job costs so you don't have to go in there. So at that point, when we launch job costs, then you're using the use of job costs. But we'll put you right in that window, and you could just fill it out very quick. But you could do a third thing, and that is to use a macro, a Sage macro. If you don't know what they are, they're very useful inside of job cost or in any application on the tools menu. And I'm showing you I have security to all the options. So you may not have security to certain options. So if they don't show up, that's probably the case. But macros allow me to I can give it a name and then do multiple steps. Like run this report, and then I could tell it to run that macro at 4 a.m. So all my reports are ready for me. That's a macro. Well, in this case, a macro would be to import that file and probably post it so that when I click the button, my work is done, unless there's encountered some issue. So macros can make the whole process speedy. The only import that you cannot do a macro for, a Sage macro, is payroll. And that's just the factor of that application. It requires you to do it inside the application. So in this case, I'm going to say, well, I already have job costs open. So I'm going to say no action, and I'm going to create that file. And it says it was successfully created. Did you expect anything else? Well, who knew it was going to work because he's seen this presentation before. Now I go to import estimates. And if I look right here, I got a new file here. And if I click there and right click and I edited it, see how it's created the correct way. So that's what import does, is it creates the file in the correct way. So I can then select that file. I could say this is going to be job cost, reject, estimate, import, whatever. And then allow creation of cost codes not on standard cost code list. If you identified a cost code in your rows that wasn't on the standard cost code list, then it will normally be rejected by this program, not Office Connector. I mean, you could have Office Connector look to see if it exists and warn you or stop you. That's just using query and conditional aspects of Excel. But otherwise, when you import, this program is going to stop you unless you click this. Import is an approved estimate change. You click that and it will come in as an estimate change. If you do that, you need to know how you handle change orders in Sage. Okay, I'm just telling you, I know a lot about this. And so if you can enter change orders elsewhere, there's a program and there'll be a screen, a change order and a change order items. This process does not create that. But if you don't care about that, you just want the entries, then this will actually work for you. And then I could tell it where to go and hit start, and that will put it into Sage. So that would be the same process if I was importing an invoice, an accounts payable, so on and so forth. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than what we originally said because I want to show you one other thing. This clearly is something. Oh, by the way, there are some people say, I don't want the designer, but could I just take these formulas and put them into my workbook? Well, it's Excel. Yeah, sure you could. You just have to know the syntax and then map them. But it's possible. You could do that. It's also, the wizard's pretty fast, but you clearly copy a formula into another Excel workbook, right? It's Excel. And then you would simply have to map it properly, So anyway, so I want to close this one. And sorry, we have to keep moving, cover everything that we want to cover. I'm going to use accounts payable for this quick example and talk a minute again about, like, let's say I'm here in an accounts payable. I want to put in invoices. There's like, let's say I did a payroll and I don't, I've been manually going over to accounts payable every time I do a payroll and typing in the invoices for what I withheld so I can remit that. Well, why would you do that if it's always the same? The information you're going to pay comes from a payroll report. Could you automate that? Of course you could automate that. So you want to think of ways that, like, what am I spending my time doing and what could I streamline? So there's lots of ways to utilize technology like this. So if you created an import file, you'd come in here and you'd go into import invoices right there, and you'd see a screen similar to the job cost. And if you want to know what it will do and what it won't do and all that stuff, it's all up in help, right? That's Office Connector import only creates that file properly. What happens to it when you import is a factor of your settings and your in help. It's the other Sage program, this Sage program. But when one way, like the examples that you see on the Launchpad are going to be like I could manually enter an invoice. And there's two examples there. Well, that's interesting, and that might be a way to do it. And there are people who would want to do that. When you go to enter an invoice in accounts payable, you can't restrict what would go into one column or another based on your own company business processes. It's just what the entry screen has, right? You can't have your custom rules. But could you have your custom rules in Excel? Absolutely. Data validation, you could do what you want. So you can control how things are created, not using the use of accounts payable, because you're just in Excel, and then you could import all of that. So Sage is rare in giving you an option to, like, sure, use the entry screens. They're there, they work, but if you want to do something more, we're going to allow you and we're going to help you. And most ERPs don't do that because you'd be using a use of, well, you wouldn't be using the use of the application, so you're not paying for it. And so take advantage of what I'm saying to work, intelligently, work smartly. But that might not be what you ultimately want. Invoices, sometimes the detail is coming from somewhere else. So I mentioned like a bank or a fuel company or whatever. I have this source and there's all this detail and I have to look at it and allocate it and type it in and man, I'm always looking for a way to not do all that stuff. So how would I go about doing that? Same exact thing that we just said. So I have an example here. Right here, there's like this import example is on the Launchpad, and in demonstrating it, I have to figure out which one has got the stuff in there that I want. That AP invoice text is the columns that I want, right? You can imagine what that looked like. So here, I had somebody who I was working with, and they said, this is what I want to enter or have to enter, and there's all these rows, and I don't want to have to do that. And so I don't want to manually enter it here. I have that data in a file, right? So I want to get it in there, and so I think they took a little consulting. It was pretty simple. Coming into this, I think that's the template. Let's open up this thing. So this is basically shows this is the form right here. I'm going to enable content. No, don't edit links. This is that first screen, the example, like AP invoice entry form. If you open up that example, it's this. And so we looked at those import functions, and the person knew Excel. And so all they wanted to do is every time they got data from outside, it had all these columns. And I think for them, the outside system had a commitment number, but it wasn't the same as what they used in Sage. But it's Excel. They used a substitution, like a lookup. So So here's this data. It was always in these columns, and they wanted to get it in there. So they copied these formulas from that other sheet right here. And once they lined these columns up, right, they tested it with one thing. They copied it down and did a 5,000 row import in minutes. And yeah, they were very happy. That's what they wanted. So it can save you an enormous amount of time. So getting the source from a CSV file and then putting the formulas, absolutely. Good way of using import. Okay, so let's say those two examples weren't what you wanted, but you wanted to do something like with miscellaneous worksheets. So that was our third example that we mentioned, and something you couldn't otherwise. Before I show you that, I want to just talk a moment about miscellaneous worksheets so that we're all informed and on the same page what these things are. So if I went into setup and I go to my job, okay, so let's just start there. And if you don't have job costs, it's probably not going to be that interesting to you, but bear with me because we have some more interesting content coming up here. But here I've got a number of screens, and see here it says miscellaneous worksheets and custom totals. So right here are the job level miscellaneous worksheet amounts, and then the accumulated totals from all the cost codes and all the categories that don't have any extras associated with them. And down here would be another screen for all the ones that have extras. So that's all the detail. But the job level could have miscellaneous worksheet content. I could use, and we have even in a template, we've demonstrated, Sage has a presentation on it, that where people are forecasting cost and revenue projections out 2, 3, 5 years, and they want to put it in there and have a report, utilize that in actuals. And we have a presentation, it's a really great one. If you're interested, you type that in comments or questions or whatever, and we can get you a presentation of that. But the goal would be to populate this. Now, how would you normally populate this or the cost code or the category or what have you, right? Because if I come here to the cost code level, and I come in here, see, now in my situation, I have group cost codes and details. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about what I'm going to say next. But if I have group cost codes and details, then I still have these amounts, right? So these miscellaneous worksheet amounts or production units or miscellaneous worksheet concepts, are accumulated here. Now these can be written directly into these cells using ODBC, Open Database Connectivity. Office Connector Write could populate these, but we don't recommend that. If the reason that the way that you're supposed to get values in here, or even at the category, is come to tasks and enter miscellaneous worksheets. So once upon a time, that's all you could do is write or come in here and manually enter. But now when we have the ability to import, we recommend to have the detail back up your totals. So don't just have $100,000 in there and then replace it with 80 and no history. This method, you'd have a history. So I could come in here and say, oh, I want to put in cost to complete and hit OK. So this is just Sage. I can set these things up right here under customized miscellaneous worksheets. I can create my own miscellaneous worksheets, and it's a little grid, and I pick it. I pick my job, and I put the date. That would be the transaction date. So I give it some date like 5/30, 2015. And then I come in here and I enter information. And I'm not going to go into more because you could get help or get a consultant to explain it or what have you. But this is one means. But that's all you have. Those are all the columns. So for forecast, cost to complete, cost at completion, units in place, a lot of people don't want to navigate that. Plus, there's things to consider when it comes to that. And so, but that is how you would normally have gotten the information in. And what I'm going to show you is another way, and I'm going to do it from scratch. But before I do that, I want to come into the settings. And to answer questions, like there's a lot of information, and maybe a lot of people wouldn't do it, but it's all pertinent, and I'm just going to give it to you all for free, and you can listen to this recording, and you'll have it. But if you go into job cost settings, over here in miscellaneous worksheets, if you have group cost codes, it asks you anyway, what level, this is miscellaneous worksheet 1, 2 through 6. What level do I want to keep track of it? So that's the group level division. It defaults to the group level. If you have it set to the group level, then you cannot import to the categories. So if you want to import the categories, then they have miscellaneous 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the category level. Then the corresponding entry here has to be set to this detail level. And if you don't know what that means, you could say, I want to know more about that or whatever, and we could answer that separately. But so you'd make this kind of a selection here. So that's something to consider. The other, if you're familiar with doing this, the other aspect when you go through this process and you put a value in, let's just do this really quick. Again, I'm just using my Sage application, and then I'm going to use Excel and Office Connector, and I can work more efficiently. But if I come in here, I would put a value in right here. Okay, so if I type this value, I can either replace the cost to complete that's already there, or I could add to it. Those are the two options. And you control that for this screen. You control it under tools when you make this sheet. You tell it what action. But no matter what you choose, Sage is going to always calculate the delta from the value you already had in there, whatever method, and put that into transactions, and then post the transaction and update it. A program. At the end of this, a program will do that. That's what Import Miscellaneous Worksheets utilizes. It replaces this, but it uses the same program that when I hit save, creates those transactions and updates. That same program is what will work with Miscellaneous Worksheets. So hopefully that didn't confuse you or cleared certain things up, or it's something you need to know something about. Before you try messing around with Miscellaneous Worksheets, look at what you already have for values. Because I've talked to people over the last 35 years and had people, oh, we don't use that. And I'm cautious, do a quick report and, oh, there's values. Oh, I didn't know about those. I guess I'll find out what those are for. And I'm like, yeah, because if you put the values in, you just wipe things out. So just be wise. You could easily do it with Office Connector, right? If I were going to create something. So I'll just show you here. I'm going to create an Excel workbook, doing something from nothing. How are we doing for time, Kohu?
We're doing well, James. You're right on.
Okay. So I'm going to do a job level miscellaneous worksheet one because it's totally simple, and it's also something that a lot of people don't do, and you really should. I mean, there's 3 of them. So a miscellaneous worksheet was created originally. I was still with the company that had this when it was created. It was created to have a value like estimates or costs that have transactional detail that back them up. So custom fields are one option. You could just put a value into a custom field. And if you want it to be different, you could change it. And you can use the query and write to do that. But if you want the detail to back it up, then that's what miscellaneous worksheets were created for. That's the purpose of miscellaneous worksheets. So if I come in here and I say, all right, well, I think I'm going to be messing around with these miscellaneous worksheets. So I'm going to come in here and do a query of my jobs, and I'm going to look at the values that are miscellaneous worksheets. And so I'm going to say job cost, job, oops, mistyped, JC space J is what I type in there. And then I hit next, and I'm going to say I want the job and the description. Now I could scroll down, or I could type in the field like that it is. It's JC miscellaneous worksheet 1, or these are in the same order that the fields are in Sage. So if you notice, all of these values are in there, and then you get to, they move them to a different table in one of the updates. Yeah, that's funny. Let's see your page up and down. JC miscellaneous. Okay, yeah, I don't think so. So I'm going to I could either cancel this here, or I could just add the job in the description and then pull the values from the other table using lookup. Just look them up right off the other table because the 2 tables are identical. But in this case, I'm just going to come right here and come back here. You grab the job. Okay, there they are. See, there's the miscellaneous worksheets. Once upon a time, the non-extra ones were on the table 1, but Sage has added more columns, and so now they're split, which is actually kind of cool because all the ones you want. So I would want to look at those values, and if I use extras, then I want to look at the corresponding extras values. So these are the extra miscellaneous category amount one. So those are categories on cost codes that are under extras. If you don't use extras and you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm going to grab, not that, but I want the extras, the, oh, well, heck, no. Extra ones are only on the extra record. There's no job ones. So all I need, because I'm putting this at the job level, I would just need the 3 fields I selected. What am I doing? Okay, sometimes I demonstrate cost code level one, so I'd have to grab both of those fields so I could see the values on cost codes to the job and cost codes to the extras, that when there's an extra involved. So anyway, I'm not going to add a condition here. But I could say the condition is that the amount is miscellaneous amount 1, 2, or 3. They're not equal to 0. I could do that. I could also then just use a filter control. But ultimately, when I hit finish, I'm going to see those values, and then right here you could filter them. But I don't have that many jobs, right? So I think that if you don't know what I'm talking about in using Excel and a filter control, I think most people do. But I would go like that. And then I would, right here on the home page, I can insert a filter, and then like that. And then I could eliminate rows, because you'll have a lot more rows than what I have here. But anyway, so now I know that there's no values on there. Now I would do that before you start doing the next thing I'm about to do. So now I want to put a value, I want to put columns here for the job, and put values into Sage from here. I'm going to do it from nothing. And so how would I, go about such a process? I'm going to show you a resource that you can have. So if you click, you go to your browser. So Event One Software is the Excel-based development, developer for Sage when it comes to Sage 300 and Sage 100 Contractor and Sage Estimating. And on the website here, if you look at this, down at the bottom, you're going to see a knowledge base, and it's got a lot of useful content right here. So if you click this knowledge base right there, and when you do that, I've got a little leg here, I think. Where you open up knowledge base. I've clicked it like 5 times, so who knows what's going to happen. I'm so impatient. Then look, I'm going to show you a kind of way to cheat. Over here on the right-hand side, open up this index, and under Office Connector, the product suite, open up all these, and see here, you got import, click this, and there's information on the functions, and there's examples, and then more on miscellaneous worksheets specifically. So that's import examples, but this is examples for miscellaneous worksheets. So I could just click right there, and I'm going to see a number of articles, and these are multimedia. So when you get into them, this describes the concepts, right? So I'm giving you a place to look post presentation. But if I come into this first example right here, I'm going to see the content pertaining to doing this. So you're going to see an explanation of the miscellaneous worksheet file menu. You'll see examples. I think still have a leg in this, or I'm in the wrong place. Oh, those are the explanation ones. Here are my examples. Sorry, everyone. That right down there is examples. I don't have my screen expanded properly, so I can't see all my columns. But it talks about the file format and all these things. So this information's here. It's in job cost. Normally it would be in job cost help, but you can't import miscellaneous worksheets, without this sort of a thing. So you're going to see all of this, but you'll have movies here. I'm just trying to rush through and not taking my time. But in here will be examples of how to use miscellaneous worksheets to do validation, or how to make something import enabled. Like if you already have a workbook and you want to import enable it, how do you do that? There'll be content here. And if you want to know more, we can give you links, or you could just explore this page at your convenience. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you one other resource in addition, because these are specific questions I've had people ask post acquisition of the technology, and the answers are quite easy. So if I come here to add-ins, notice here there's a control panel. So if you come into control panel, this is actually where you would license. You get an email when you acquire the technology, and you license Office Connector import in this area, put it in there and refresh. But down here, it says file format. See here? And these are all the different things you could import. These are all different features. And specifically, I want to import miscellaneous worksheets. So I went to my control panel on my toolbar, and I went to file formats, and I looked at miscellaneous worksheets, and it tells me right here, here are the columns that you could import. And then it says, you know, you have values like click here and you'll see the different transaction types. Click here and you'll see the values for the actions that you might want to do. So these will tell you what the column should be in order for the import to properly function. If you click this, you'll get more information right here. Okay. So this, now you've got a HTML file. It could be saved and referenced, you know, offline, not directly on the website, but it shows you, you know, so the transaction type, if I want to update the miscellaneous amount 1 on the job table, the transaction type, that's its name right there, MISC amount 1. That's the value that has to go into the transaction type to update it. If I was at the cost code level and I want to update estimated production units, that's the transaction type value. So just think of this as an Excel function, and there are parameters. And the parameter that has what transaction, what are you trying to do? That's the transaction. These are the potential values. So you're just going to match the one with what you want to do. It may sound difficult. It's not. When you do an example, when you try this, it's actually quite easy. There, you know, there's the date and all that. The only other thing is the action. You either need to use an R or the word replace, or A and the word add. So add means I have $100,000 in there and I want to make it 120 total. So I'm going to add 20,000. Replaces, I send 120,000 to Sage, and it goes, oh, well, there's already 100,000. I'm going to calculate 20,000. So that's the process. So I just wanted to show that because I've had people see the presentation and it works, but when they try to figure it out, it's mysterious to them. It's not. It's all right here. And when you see an example, which the knowledge base has them, it makes it all quite easy. So let's say I want to do what I described here. I'm going to come here, and now I'm going to use the wizard. So if you're playing this presentation back later, you can say, I'm going to fast forward right to this part and see the example, or go to any other part. But I'm going to click this wizard right there, and now it says, what do you want to import? Now I can import any of these things. Let's say I picked import, you know, whatever, AP invoice import file. If you if you bought job cost estimate import, you'll still see that option here, but that doesn't mean you have it licensed. You'd have to have acquired it. So I want to reinforce that each individual feature has its own price, but you could just get all of them for a very reasonable fee, and the designer includes all of them. But in my case, I want to import this estimate import file, so I hit next. And it says, okay, you know, the types of things, not estimate, what am I doing? Miscellaneous worksheet. The type of thing that I was going down the wrong path. The miscellaneous worksheet, I hit next, and it says, I knew what columns to expect. So when I went next, it's like, oh, those aren't the right columns. So job is going to be one of the things, right? I want to have a job somewhere, or maybe I already have it like in cells, like, because I've manually prepared what I want to enter into Sage. So job, I don't care about extra cost coding category. That is actually how Sage's transaction services knows that it's a job level miscellaneous worksheet, because it doesn't have extra cost code category. So then I want the transaction type, I want the date, I could put in a description, and then amount or units. If you want to know if you're supposed to put in units or amount, that help I showed you will tell you. Here are the ones that the value Sage is expecting are units. Here are the ones that expecting amounts. So a link to that page will answer all those questions. And then the action. So those are the columns I want. So when I hit next, it says, okay, I want to create an entry grid for the selected columns, or I want to just map to data I already have on my spreadsheet. So quite often that's what people choose, because they already have the data that they prepare, and then they manually then enter it, and they don't want to do that anymore. They choose this option, and they tell the function where to get the values. But I'm going to create an entry grid, and so it hits OK. So now I have these columns. Why did I put it all the way over there? Who's to know my thoughts? I'll just delete them, because I wanted to show you my power of Excel. I knew how to delete columns. But the point is that the way import works is a function, as I've already mentioned to you. This TS import function is what does it, right? When it's mapped to columns that have values, and you come up here and you tell it to create the import file, it'll look at all the functions and create a file for you and then take the proper action. In this case, it won't launch a program inside of Sage that's on the tools menu. It launches a special program for transaction services. I'll add a footnote there for people who have these CSV files. They're already properly formatted. They're coming from somewhere else, and you already know they're properly formatted. You simply want to get the values into miscellaneous worksheets. There's a way to take your CSV file and put it into that program. And if you want to know more, then you could follow up with a question or what have you. But in this case, then all I would put is the job, right? The transaction type. So if you remember, and you may not remember, so I'll come back up here and show you. If I go in here to the file formats, remember, and I was down here to miscellaneous worksheets, and I wanted to know my transaction types, I could either click here or I could click this that has all of it in there. So if I click the transaction type right there, it tells me. So I want miscellaneous amount 1, exactly. If you put in something else, it's going to reject because it's expecting that value. Maybe I can even do this and cheat. What do you think? If I can cheat, I'm going to always cheat. Okay, so there you go. And then I'm going to use, you know, like add to or replace, like an A or whatever. So right here in this value, goodbye, I want to put that right there. Well, I think I'll come up here and do that. Okay, the transaction date is 5/30/2019. The description is miscellaneous amount. There you go. How much money? Now, let's say you put commas in the number. Normally you shouldn't, but the function will take them out when we create the file. And then the action is I want to, you know, add to or replace. So I'm going to take 20,000. So whatever's there, add 20,000 more to it. And Cole, can you still hear me? I saw a phone call, and if I ever dropped off, you'd probably be calling me going, James, I can't hear you.
Nope, we can still hear you, James, loud and
Okay.
clear. We got
So,
about a 4-minute countdown.
okay, so I'm going to click this up. The act is, 1 second here. Yeah, I'll hit the, so I want to create this, and it's going to create that file, and it can then launch import miscellaneous worksheet. So it creates that file, and it will have those rows in there. So I hit OK, and I already have it out there. So I hit replace, and it was just telling me. So now I can tell it the file. There it is, and the rejection. So I hit import, and I can say replace. Let's just go ahead and do it. And that should have correctly created it.